Tonight, let us drift westward on a gentle current of thought to a world where the Atlantic was not a barrier, but a bridge. A world where the eagles of Rome did not turn back from the ocean's edge, but learned the language of the western winds. Close your eyes and imagine with me the soft, salt-tinged air of a port in Hispania. The year is 98 CE. A trading galley, the Fortuna Redux, returns not from Alexandria or Carthage, but from a voyage of 18 moons. Its sails are patched with unfamiliar cloth, a coarse, durable weave, and in its hold, among amphorae of olive oil, are baskets of strange flat seeds, the color of sunset, and soft bales of a white fiber that floats like cloud. The captain, a weathered man named Lucius, does not speak of monsters or the edge of the world. He speaks, in a voice worn smooth by the sea, of gentle rivers wider than the Tiber, and of forests where the trees touch the sky. This is our quiet beginning, the moment the ripple begins, so soft, so slow, from a single stone cast into the deep. Picture, then, the ripple widening. It travels first through the ports, the whispering networks of merchants and shipwrights. The strange seeds, maize, they will come to be called, are planted in the gardens of curious patricians. They sprout tall, with tassels like golden thread, and their yield is a marvel. The white fiber, cotton, is spun by skilled hands in Pompeii, becoming tunics lighter than linen, cool against the skin in the summer heat. But these are just whispers of change. The true shift comes not with goods, but with a single weathered map. Lucius, given a modest pension and a small villa by a fascinated Trajan, spends his days with scholars. He describes coastlines, the great gulf, the river mouths. He sketches, with a charcoal stick on papyrus, the gentle slopes of lands he called Terra Occidentalis, the western land. His descriptions are not of conquest, but of observation. The long communal houses built from timber and bark, smelling of cedar and hearth smoke. The vast ordered fields of the river peoples that put Roman agricultura to shame. The gentle winding trails worn soft by moccasined feet. And so, the first official expedition is not a legion, but a collegium, a company. A philosopher-botanist named Gaius Herennius Secundus leads it. His ship, the Speculatrix, is built for curiosity, not war. Imagine its voyage, the endless hypnotic rhythm of oars dipping into deep blue, then the startling, vibrant green of the Sargasso Sea, a floating meadow in the ocean. They make landfall not with trumpets, but with the soft crunch of their hull on a sandy beach somewhere in a place that will one day be called Chesapeake. The air smells of pine and damp earth. They are met not by armies, but by watchful men in deerskin, who observe from the tree line. Gaius orders his men to lay down their tools and sit upon the sand. They wait. For 3 days, they trade gestures, smiles, and simple gifts. A bronze mirror for a string of shell beads, a clay cup for a carved pipe of soapstone. Communication blooms slowly, like a flower opening to the sun. They learn words. They share bread, Roman pennies, and a flat, soft cake made from maize. This is the pattern that sets, like clay in a gentle kiln. Contact is not a collision, but a confluence. More ships follow, perhaps one every other year. They are small, private ventures mostly. They bring back stories that become legends in the taverns and courtyards of Rome. Stories of cities built upon great mounds with plazas that hold thousands, where the people watch the stars with a precision that rivals the Greeks. Stories of a plant whose leaves, when dried and smoked in a pipe, brings a calm, contemplative peace. They speak of healing herbs, of a way to make syrup from tree sap that is sweeter than honey. And they speak, always with a tone of reverence, of the sheer, unimaginable space. Land that seems to have no end, forests that swallow sound, skies at night so crowded with stars they look like spilled salt on black marble. Now let us follow the ripple to a single life, a ground-level story in this softly changing world. Consider a young woman named Olilia living in a modest domus on the Aventine Hill in Rome in the year 150 CE. Her father is a scribe who sometimes works for the Guild of Exploratores Occidentales. On his desk, he keeps a curious object, a globe, not of the known world, but of the whole world, as best the geographers can now guess. It is made of polished wood, and the new lands are inlaid with a lighter shade of oak. Alelia, perhaps 10 years old, is allowed to turn it with her fingers. She traces the familiar curve of the Mediterranean, her home, a sea she knows. Then she spins it further, her fingertip crossing the wide blank blue of the Atlantic, until it finds the bumpy, vast coastline of the West. It is real to her, not a myth. In the market, she has seen men with tattoos in swirling patterns, traders from the western lands who come to learn and to share. She has tasted a sweet, chewy candy made from the sap of their trees. She sleeps under a blanket of their cotton, woven with dyes of Roman purple and a vibrant new red from western berries. Her world is wider, her imagination vaster. She does not fear the edge of the map, for her map has no edge. When she closes her eyes at night, she does not dream of wolves or storms. She dreams of rivers she has never seen, flowing slow and broad under unfamiliar constellations. Her dreams are peaceful, expansive. Then decades turn, like the pages of a slow, illuminated manuscript. By 200 CE, the changes have seeped into the mortar of the empire. There is no sudden revolution, only a gradual, gentle tilting. The Roman appetite for grain begins to be supplemented, in the poorer regions especially, by maize. It grows in rocky soil. It withstands dry summers. Famine becomes a rarer ghost. Cotton becomes common, clothing the masses in a soft, washable comfort previously unknown. From the West comes the knowledge of rubber, a curious substance that bounces and seals. It is a novelty at first, used for children's balls and waterproofing the seams of ships, but its potential hums quietly in the background. The political consequences are subtle, like a change in the light. The energy of Rome, which historically turned inward to civil war or eastward to Parthia, now has a quiet outlet. ambitious men of the second sons, the restless, the curious, look west. They establish not military colonies, but trading emporia. Small fortified towns of timber and brick arise on the western shores, places with names like Portus Concordiae and Novum Forum. They are way stations, places of exchange. Here, Roman glass beads and iron knives are traded for furs, for tobacco, for knowledge. Roman engineers help a river city to design an aqueduct, marveling at the people's own sophisticated earthworks. In return, they learn to build with the land, not just upon it. The Western peoples, for their part, are not passive. Their own ambassadors sail east. A delegation from the great city of Cahokia visits Rome during the reign of Marcus Aurelius. They walk the forum in their cloaks of painted leather and feather. Calm and observant, they are shown the aqueducts, the baths, the libraries. They are most impressed. The historians note by the sewers a quiet, practical admiration. Technologies blend, not with a clang, but with a whisper. The Western peoples adopt the wheel, not for chariots of war, but for carts to haul their abundant harvests. Romans, in turn, learn new ways of preserving food, smoking and drying techniques that make their long sea voyages more viable. The Western bow, far more powerful than the Roman, is studied by artisans, but it is not mass-produced for war. It becomes the tool of hunters and explorers. The most profound exchange is of the mind. Roman astronomers, with their precise charts, meet Western sky watchers whose myths are written in the constellations. Their calendars both deeply attuned to the cycles of sun and moon are compared and combined. A more accurate, more harmonious calendar emerges, one that spreads slowly across the empire, aligning civic life more gently with the natural world. Imagine now, the empire in 300 CE. It is not the familiar, strained, and fracturing entity of our history. It is something else, broader, perhaps a little less intensely focused. The constant pressure on the eastern and northern frontiers is eased, not because the threats are gone, but because the Roman psyche is no longer a closed circuit. There is a sense of possibility. The poet Claudian writes not only of gods and heroes, but of the whispering oaks of the Western world, whose leaves tell stories in a tongue older than Latin. Mosaics in villas in Britannia feature not just dolphins and tridents, but strange, graceful animals. The elk, the possum, the hovering hummingbird rendered in 1,000 tiny tiles. The bathhouses of Rome sometimes have a laconicum, a sweat lodge, built in the Western style, a dark, round room where steam rises from herbs like sage and sweetgrass, a place for quiet purification. The great crises still come, of course. Plagues travel the new routes too. Emperors rise and fall, but the narrative is different. The story of Rome is no longer a story of a brilliant flame burning itself out in a closed room. It is the story of a river that, upon reaching the sea, discovers a new continent on the other side and finds its waters mingling with a vast new current. The flow continues. As our journey through this alternate antiquity draws to a close, let your mind rest in a single serene image. It is dawn at Portus Concordiae. The air is cool and carries the scent of pine resin and baking flatbread. A Roman merchant, his hair streaked with gray, shares a morning pipe of tobacco with a local elder, a man whose face is a map of kindly wrinkles. They sit on a log, watching the mist rise off the river. They do not speak much. They watch a birch bark canoe glide silently past, heading upstream. The only sounds are the lap of water, the distant cry of a bird, the soft crackle of their pipe. They are two men from worlds that were once separate, now bound by a quiet mutual respect and the shared rhythm of this peaceful morning. There is no talk of empire or destiny or glory. There is only the day beginning, the slow, sure turn of the world. In this timeline, Rome did not so much conquer the world as it learned to converse with more of it. The relentless engine of conquest found a counterweight in the vast, gentle patience of another continent. The result was not a Roman America, but something softer, slower, a mingling, a mutual shaping, like two great rivers meeting and flowing on together, wider and deeper. So, as you drift toward sleep, let your thoughts be as wide and peaceful as that imagined ocean. Let your breath be the slow tide on a shore where two worlds met not with a clash, but with a curious, gentle touch. History is not always a shout. Sometimes it is a whisper carried on a trade wind, a seed planted in foreign soil that grows into something new and beautiful. Your own dreams tonight may wander those forest paths, may sail those calm, starlit seas. There is no hurry here, no urgent destiny, only the slow, beautiful unfolding of a world that took a different, quieter path. Thank you for dreaming with us tonight. Sleep well. The gray-haired merchant, Marcus, drew slowly on the pipe, the sweet, earthy scent of the tobacco mingling with the morning damp. His companion, whose name was Conti, meaning the patient one, exhaled a plume of smoke that hung in the still air before dissolving into the mist. They had shared this ritual for years, a silent communion that needed no translation. Marcus's Latin had grown sprinkled with words from Conti's tongue, words for the specific light on the river at dusk, or the particular chill that foretold snow. Conti, in turn, used Latin terms for concepts like archives and mortar, but always flavored with his own understanding. Down at the wooden wharves of Portus Concordiae, the day's soft activity was beginning. The night's fishing boats, hybrids of Roman design and local canoe craftsmanship, were returning, their nets glistening with silver catch. From the brick and timber Horium, the scent of stored grain, a mix of Roman wheat and the ever-present, nutty maize wafted out through open doors. A child, her heritage a blend of both worlds evident in her features and her tunic of Roman-cut cotton dyed with local walnut husks, chased a dog made from a bouncing rubber ball. The scene was not spectacular. It was simply life, woven from two distinct threads into a single, durable fabric. This was the reality of the ripple. 2 centuries after the Fortuna Redux first made landfall, the grand, silent integration continued, felt not in edicts from the Palatine Hill, but in the marrow of daily existence. In the heart of the empire, the texture of life had softened. The cursus publicus, the imperial post, now carried letters sealed with not only wax, but sometimes with a clever, local adhesive gum that held fast in rain. In the gardens of suburban villas, alongside rosemary and lavender, grew sunflowers, their great heads turning like slow heliotropes, and climbing beans that fixed nitrogen in the soil. Learned from Western planting techniques called the Three Sisters, the Roman diet had expanded, subtly altering the national character. The ubiquitous poles, the porridge of emmer wheat, was now often enriched with the golden meal of maize, or sweetened with a drizzle of maple syrup. Tomatoes, called wolf peaches for their bright, suspicious beauty, were slowly gaining favor, first as ornamental plants, then, tentatively, in sauces. The empire, once prone to a certain brittle intensity, found a measure of calm in full bellies and new flavors. The exchange of knowledge was a slow, deep current. In the library at Alexandria, now housing a special wing called the Occidentalis, scrolls sat beside bound codices of a local paper made from bark. Here, a Roman herbalist's meticulous drawings of medicinal plants were annotated, in a different hand, with uses known to Western healers for millennia. Willow bark for pain, the fuzzy leaves of a certain plant for lung ailments. A star chart from the Mound City of the Ohio showed the night sky divided not into the familiar Greco-Roman figures, but into a great celestial river, a horned serpent, and a cluster of sisters. A scholar from Athens, studying both, had recently published a treatise suggesting the heavens were a story told in two equally valid dialects. This intellectual humility was perhaps the most profound change. The Roman sense of auctoritas, authority, had met its match not in superior force, but in ancient, proven wisdom. It tempered the imperial instinct. When engineers from Rome arrived to help a lakeside town with recurrent flooding, they did not simply impose a Roman solution. They first sat with the town's elders for many days, learning how the water had historically flowed, where the old channels lay beneath the soil, what spirits were believed to dwell in the springs. The resulting system was a hybrid, a Roman-style sluice gate regulated by a clever counterweight mechanism inspired by local fish traps, and the channel itself was lined with sacred stones chosen by the elders. It worked, not just hydraulically, but spiritually. The report sent back to the Senate concluded, "To build with a people is stronger than to build for them." Back in Portus Concordiae, Marcus finally broke the silence, his voice as rough as the bark they sat on. "The Placidia is due before the new moon," he said, gazing at the river as if he could already see the merchant galley rounding the bend. "My son is on it." Conti nodded slowly, packing a little more tobacco into the pipe's bowl with a calloused thumb. "He brings your granddaughter." "He does. Her first crossing." Marcus felt a familiar knot of anxiety, the legacy of a sailor's life. The Atlantic was not a tame pond. Storms still rose, vast and terrible. But the routes were known now, the way stations on the great islands reliable. The ships were better, too. Their hulls, still of Mediterranean oak, were treated with rubber-based sealants that made them tighter. Their sails were supplemented on long ocean stretches with a new rigging design adapted from the swift, shallow draft canoes of the north, allowing them to tack more efficiently against the wind. "The river will welcome her," Conti said simply. It was both a statement and a blessing. This was the other face of the change. The families. It was no longer just explorers and traders. It was sons and daughters, grandparents and grandchildren. People came west not only for fortune, but for a different rhythm of life. Some were farmers, granted tracts of land under an imperial program that encouraged sustainable settlement. They learned to grow maize in mounds with beans and squash, as the locals did, creating small, self-sufficient homesteads that dotted the coastline. Others were artisans, their skills finding new expression, A glassblower from Campania discovered the local sands produced a stunning green hue, and now his workshop supplied beads that traveled deep into the interior along ancient trading paths, becoming prized heirlooms. The political entity of Rome had stretched and adapted. The Western territories were not provinces in the traditional sense. They were a foederata occidentalis, a federation of the West. Local governing structures, the councils of elders, the clan systems, remained largely intact. They were tied to Rome by treaties of mutual trade and defense, and by the soft power of shared technology, language, and culture. A Roman quaestor might administer a trading post, but he did so alongside a local saking or a priestess of the corn. The flow of troops was minimal. The legions were still needed on the Rhine and the Euphrates, but the presence of the empire was felt in the roads, simple, well-drained gravel paths that followed the old trails, and in the occasional way station that offered rest, medical care, and a stable for the message riders who now carried news from Portus Concordiae to Rome in a relay that took months but was astonishingly reliable. As the sun climbed higher, burning off the mist, the sounds of the port grew more distinct. Marcus heard the melodic strain of a bone flute, a local tune intertwined with the rhythmic clang of a Roman smith shaping an iron tool. He heard laughter, a universal sound. He thought of his granddaughter, Livia, raised in the bustling, marble-clad chaos of Ostia, about to step into this quieter, greener world. She would learn things he never had as a boy. She would know how to identify tracks in the forest, which mushrooms were safe, how to read the weather in the clouds that piled over the western mountains. She would also carry her Latin, her history of Aeneas and Augustus, the logic of geometry. She would be a creature of two worlds, perfectly at home in the liminal space between them. The crisis of the 3rd century, when it had come, had played out differently here, when emperors had risen and fallen in quick, bloody succession. When inflation had racked the heartlands, the West had acted as a stabilizer. Grain shipments from the fertile river valleys had alleviated shortages. The flow of new ideas, of different ways to organize and think, had provided a psychological release valve. Historians later would argue that the very vastness of the connection had prevented a total collapse. The empire's center of gravity had subtly shifted, becoming less about a single dominant city and more about a network, a web of connections that spanned an ocean. It was more resilient because it was less concentrated. Conti handed the pipe back to Marcus. "I will have my daughter bring food," he said, rising with a soft grunt. "The first strawberries are in, and we have that hard cheese from the settlement upriver." Marcus smiled. The simplicity of it, the profound goodness of shared food. "Thank you, my friend." He remained on the log, watching the river. A vision came to him, not of the future, but of a present that stretched out like the water itself. He saw his granddaughter's children and their children. They might live in a house that was part Roman villa, part longhouse, with a steam bath in the cellar and a garden of 3 sisters out back. They might speak a language that was a fluid blend and worship a pantheon that included the local spirits of forest and stream alongside the Roman noumena. They would tell stories of the great voyage of the Fortuna Redux, and also of the time the white buffalo brought the sacred pipe to the people. Rome would not fall in this world, not in the way it had in his own history. It would transform. It would become something else, a truly global commonwealth, its Latin roots grafted with countless other stocks, producing a civilization not of uniformity, but of harmonized diversity. The relentless drive for conquest would have been tempered, not by defeat, but by the discovery that there was too much world to ever fully own, and that partnership yielded richer fruits than domination ever could. The afternoon waned, the light turning golden and long. The plow Daia did not appear that day, nor the next. But Marcus felt no fear, only a quiet anticipation. The river was wide, the world was vast, and the connections that bound it were now as strong as the cables that held a ship's mast, woven from many strands. He slept soundly each night, lulled by the deep silence of the forest that pressed gently against the settlement, a silence that was not empty, but full of a different kind of life. When the ship finally did arrive, its sails pale against a slate-blue autumn sky, it was to the ringing of the port's bell, a sound that was neither an alarm nor summons to war, but a clear, welcoming chime. Marcus stood on the dock, Concy beside him. He watched the gangplank lower and saw his son's face, older, wiser. And then he saw little Livia, clutching her father's hand, her eyes wide as saucers as she took in the towering trees, the smell of wood smoke and pine, the people in their blend of garments, the whole new world that was, miraculously, her inheritance. She stepped onto the dock, her small shoes tapping on the weathered wood. She looked at Marcus, then at Conti, then at the endless forest behind them. She did not cry, nor hide. She smiled, a slow, wondering smile. And in that moment, Marcus saw the ripple become a wave, not of conquest, but of continuity, a gentle, endless wave of curiosity and connection, rolling forward into time, as calm and inevitable as the river meeting the